Welcome to Launch Stories. So we're all about connecting and educating Chilliwack entrepreneurs. And I want to thank our sponsors before we get going that help us put on these monthly events. And so we have the Chilliwack Economic Partners Corporation and the Chilliwack Innovation Network at our gold sponsor level. It's here for SEPCO and Company. And thanks to the Stalo Community Futures through a grant from CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. They've been a sponsor over the last year here. And we've done a number of things together, and that's been a great partnership. So let's hear it for Stalo. And even news to Colin, who coordinates with me. I recruited a new sponsor within the last few days. The Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce has come on, and they're going to help us promote this event and recruitment, especially female founders and entrepreneurs. That's one area that we've struggled with. So let's thank the Chamber of Commerce. And thanks to our partners for organizing Launch Stories every month. We've got Currency Marketing, Cowork Chilliwack, and Zynim Ventures. Thank you. And special thanks to Elise McAlpine for running all the AV equipment and recording the show tonight. And you can see her in her environment here. And you can actually see out of the corner of your eye the live show being cut. And so if she's pressed all the buttons correctly, there's no editing necessary at the end. So no pressure. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce our guest this evening. He is the co-founder of Universal Construction. Please give a warm Launch Stories welcome to Jeff Boychuk. Thanks, Jeff. So Jeff's a member here at Cowork Chilliwack, and I was thinking he would make a great guest for Launch Stories, and I asked him a couple weeks ago, and he said, I'm all in, not knowing what he was getting himself into. But I've gotten to know Jeff over the last couple of years, and it's really interesting to see your business from the outside and now to get a chance to dig into it. Before we get started, can you give me your elevator pitch for Universal Construction? What would you tell somebody that didn't know what you'd do just on a maximum 2-3 story elevator ride?
So essentially, we're a civil construction company, and by that, we build road infrastructure and underground pipeline infrastructure for residential, commercial subdivisions, industrial as well. And we essentially move a lot of earth and construct access to all the subdivisions that everybody here typically lives in.
It sounds like what every 3-year-old boy wanted to do when they grow up. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Move around dirt, make a mess, and have fun out in the sun. Yeah. For sure. So you grew up in Chilliwack. Tell me what that was like.
Yeah, it was good. Chilliwack was an excellent place to grow up. It was obviously, 52 years ago, it was a much smaller community, and it's grown leaps and bounds. But it was small, and I remember it took about 10 minutes to get from Sardis to Chilliwack, which now it takes like an hour. But it was a really good, safe place to grow up. Obviously, we live in a beautiful community and nice scenery and a lot of naturous things to do.
So I moved here in high school, and I was north of the freeway, so I was Chilliwack. I understand you were Sardis, so it was a little bit of a rivalry all the time. What was it like at Sardis High?
Sardis was a good school. Obviously, it no longer exists, the school that I went to. Much smaller, obviously a lot less kids. I think you probably had the ability to get to know people better back then. Mm-hmm. And it was big on sports. Did a lot of sports in school, and it was kind of my thing. And I can see Sardis is still big on that these days.
So you graduated, and you got a part-time or full-time job at Yarrow Wood.
I did.
Tell me about that experience.
Yeah. So when I graduated, I knew I was going to go back to school, but I wanted to basically work a year and get my hands dirty. And so I had a friend that worked at Yarrow Wood, which is a cedar mill out on Number 5 Road in Yarrow, and basically started working there, started stacking lumber on the green chain, and worked hard. Eventually got asked to see if I wanted to cut and learn how to cut and grade lumber, which didn't make some of the current employees happy that had been working there for a while, but the boss basically told him and said, hey, well, if you put the effort in that he does, then you get that opportunity. But moving up into grading lumber, I kind of won some friends down on the floor because, typically the graders would stack up the guys with lumber and the graders would stand there and watch them while they're sorting their piles. And I would just hop down and I would help them because I don't want to stand still all day. And so sort of earned their respect and moved up to a forklift driver and almost all the way to the top there within 1 year. So
wow.
Bosses tried to talk me from, to not leave, but obviously I had other endeavors that I wanted to move on to.
So from the very get-go, it sounds like you were a hard worker.
Yeah, I grew up under hard workers. My grandfather, my uncles, my dad, they were all hard workers. So I just thought that's what you did. And, I started my first job as a paper route when I was in grade 6. And then in grade 8, I was a busboy at the pantry and doing my paper route, which my grandfather did with me. We turned it into the biggest route in Chilliwack Progress route in Chilliwack, and we actually pushed the papers around in a baby buggy. So he'd work one side of the road, and I'd work the other side of the road. And I basically held on to that paper route through working at the pantry. Went to Burger King after that, and then one of the people on my paper route owned the Chilliwack Husky truck stop at the time, and he asked me if I would come work with him there. So finally, I let go of the paper route after that and worked at the Husky truck stop from grade 10 to grade 12.
You mentioned your grandpa. He's from the Ukraine and emigrated to Canada, correct?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a great mentor of yours, I understand.
Oh yeah, the biggest mentor. It actually chokes me up a bit when I think about it. But if it wasn't for him and my grandma, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it just, both of them were huge influences in my life. Both with work ethic and emotionally. So yeah, great people. That's where I learned it from.
And so you did the gap year, and then what was your plan?
So I did the cedar mill, and I had been accepted to the criminal justice degree program at UFE. I knew I wanted to be a Vancouver City policeman. So the plan was go to UFE, get my 4-year degree, join the Vancouver City Policing Auxiliary. Basically, I worked at, that was the plan, essentially, to do that. And then things happened and changed, so.
And I guess Vancouver, is that because French wasn't a highlight or that was just your destination?
No, I mean, I at the time, I'd married my high school sweetheart. I didn't want to get posted into the middle of nowhere going the RCMP route.
Right.
I was a man of action, right? So I wanted to make sure I went somewhere where I knew I was going to be, engaged in doing something, and I thought Vancouver City would be the place to do that.
Mm-hmm. And you listed a bunch of part-time jobs, but I think this one was pretty influential on where you ended up.
It was, right? Yeah. So my wasn't quite my father-in-law at the time, but my girlfriend's dad at the time, he was a pretty relevant contractor in town here, and building contractor, and he got me a job at Pioneer. And then, other than some small projects that me and my grandfather had done over the course of my childhood, I barely knew what a 2x4 was. I didn't do woodworking in school or anything like that.
Okay.
So when I went to Pioneer, I started to do that part time while I was going to school. Learning parts and pieces and everything that comes along with working at a building supply store. So.
And tell me the story, like you jumped from criminology to contracting, and how did that all come about?
So I was working at Pioneer, and I basically did 3 semesters in my crim degree, and sat down with my father-in-law just before the summer semester, and he said, why don't you come and work for me as a carpenter's helper in the summertime? He said, it'll be a good opportunity, make some better money, in between semesters. So I went, worked the whole summer, and really enjoyed the work. And we sat down, for a beer at the end of the summer. And he basically said that, I think you need to reconsider your career path. And I said, well, why would I do that? I said, want to be a policeman, want to have a pension, job security. And he said, well, he said, you could make more money in the trades than you could probably ever make as a policeman, if you apply yourself and push forward. So stirred my interest for sure, because I really enjoyed it. And he said, you've got the knack for it. It's something you should do. So I basically thought about it, and I went back to him. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'll step away from school. I'll come work for you. Stipulation being I want to work for a year and then do my carpentry apprenticeship. And said, for sure.
Got it.
Yeah, then we were off to the races.
And where did you do the apprenticeship?
Just through the local ministry.
Okay.
They were based out of Abbotsford. And then I worked under him. I worked under him for my entire apprenticeship, but I basically worked for a couple of years. He had slowed down a bit. A friend of mine's uncle had a framing company, or a host construction company. When I first learned from my father-in-law, who was a great mentor, taught me pretty much everything I know on both fronts of, the administrative side and of course the practical side. And, I worked for him. We did additions, finishing, a little bit of framing, and I got to be a really well-rounded carpenter. But the other company that I went and worked for, they basically just framed houses. So that was another avenue I wanted to get a lot of experience. And I basically went and finished the last 2 years of my apprenticeship through that company.
Side question, was it weird working for your soon-to-be father-in-law, or was it just unnatural?
He was a great guy to learn from. I could learn by asking. I could just learn by watching. And that's how I do a lot of things. I just kind of watch people who are very capable and absorb and take what's useful and obviously discard what's not. But I mean, he was a super talented guy. So he was really good at mixing work and personal, and as was I. So I'm sure there was a few things here and there where, I took things a little personally, but we were always good at sorting it out. So
great. Well, I know one of the things you mentioned that was, and I was not familiar with this, but Corcan is a corporation of the federal government.
Yes.
Basically, it's an institutional construction company, and you worked there through your 20s.
Yes.
How did you make the jump from independent, like framing companies and so forth, to Corcan?
So basically, once I had finished through the apprenticeship process, my father-in-law, he was working for Corcan as a project manager. He was their main guy. And so I basically went and started working for him as a construction foreman. And it was another step in my career for experience, because now we're doing more commercialized, industrialized type construction. So we did everything. I think my first job was in Mountain Institution, and I remember it was his first job there too. And they basically sat us down in Public Works and they told us, hey, this is no joke,
Yeah, that's high security federal, right?
High security, yeah. But we also were going to have inmate labor working for us. So that's part of Corcan's mandate is basically training inmates. And so they basically work along with us, work along with other trades that we bring in, electricians, plumbers, and so forth. And so they basically said, working with these guys, you have to watch your back. They're going to ask you to bring things in and this and that. And, it's funny, I worked several years at Corcan. Never once did anybody ever ask me to bring anything for them.
So did 3 semesters of criminology scare you or prepare you?
Yeah. You know what? By the time I got to my third, little sidetrack, but once I got to my third semester of the criminology, I pretty much knew I didn't want to be a police officer. So it was actually good timing that came along, and it helped me almost consider it easier. So, but yeah, I don't know if it helped, but it, I just found it was, I met some pretty interesting people there, and I just, I treated them just like I would treat anybody else. And in return, they worked hard for me. I trained them. I was always been a very hands-on leader. So it's like everybody that I've ever trained or has worked under me knows what I can do. And so, they just kind of lead by example. It's pretty much my philosophy.
And so that was really through your entire 20s leading up to being a site superintendent by age 29, which to me sounds pretty young at be working for the federal government in that capacity. What did you learn through that experience?
Well, I was superintendent a little earlier than that, probably by 27, and I was running a lot of jobs for my father-in-law, and it was actually making it easier for him because he didn't have to. He was managing multiple jobs, so he didn't always have to be on mine. And by the time I hit 29, I'd been given the opportunity within Core Canada to manage my own job. And so I was in Ferndale Institution and took over a job that somebody else had been pulled off of. So was successful in doing that on the first job, and then did another project in that institution before other things developed with the start of Universal.
And if that wasn't enough, you started to dabble in entrepreneurship at that point, in self-employment to a degree. And you mentioned skid steer. I did a quick Google search of that because I have no idea what that. Had you said, those small bobcats, I might have known what you were talking about. But you and your buddy Dwayne in the year 2000 bought one of these with the intent to rent it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So in working for Corcan, I was renting skid steers all the time for a lot of the work we did, and obviously it was a lot of fun, and I got to run it, and him and I, Dwayne is my business partner, and we've been we've known each other since we were babies and been friends all the way through 50 years. So we always said by the time we were 30 we were going to start our own business in some way, shape, or form together. And in getting the skid steer, renting it to Corcan, it kind of developed from there. So it was very short-lived, the rental portion of it. And I used to frame houses for Kingma Brothers, who was a well-known local developer. And Dwayne worked he was a machine operator by trade, came up through civil construction, did pipe laying and whatnot, and had a lot of experience in that. And he worked for a company called Lyle Hamilton and Sons, and he ran a machine for them. So he did a lot of foundation excavations and backfills, pipe work, and then of course I did a lot of house framing for them. So Jim Vroom, who was the site superintendent for Kingma at the time and basically ran their whole show, he called me up one day and he said, "Jeff, I heard you bought a skid steer." And I said, "Yeah, we did." And he said, he says, "Well, why don't you and Dwayne come and start doing our exterior concrete prep, meaning driveways, staircases, things like that?" And I just said, "Well, Jim, we have full-time jobs. Like when are we going to have time to do that?" And I said, "Plus you have a guy, the company that you hired that does that." And he says, "Well, that's not quite working out." And he said, "Let's start with one and see how it goes and see what you can take on." So before you know it, we were working day and night, and this guy here was just a little guy, and we were working evenings, weekends, pretty much a full-time job on top of a full-time job, just with Kingma.
And when I believe Dwayne took the leap first and quit his job and went full-time in, was it called Universal Construction at the time, right off the bat? Or?
It was called Universal Contracting.
Got it.
And actually my mom came up with the name when we were picking out names or trying to figure out what we were going to call ourselves. And, we wanted something that, meant universal and encompasses everything, right? Very versatile. So, Dwayne made the leap first. We obviously, coming up through the construction industry, there was a lot of people that knew us. We had made a lot of connections, so we were fairly confident that we would have, some clients in going forward. We bought our first machine, and that was an endeavor because trying to get financed when you're, not even 30 years old on a $200,000 piece of equipment, it's not easy.
Wow.
So Finning took a chance on us. We did rental purchase, $8,000 a month payments on our first machine. And like I said, Dwayne went full-time first. We're doing foundation excavations and backfills. I would come out in the evenings and help him lay pipe around the foundation. We still had the concrete prep at the same time, so we were doing that full-time. And I basically stuck. I had to finish off my responsibilities with Corcan, finish off my last project there, And then once I did that, I parted ways and then went full-time doing concrete forming and the skid steer work while Dwayne was doing the foundation excavation and backfills.
Was that a leap for you? For Dwayne, it sounds like it was a continuation of the type of work that he mainly did.
Yeah.
And then from it sounds of it, you were mostly above grade doing framing and the build out. Yeah. But I imagine you did some of that along the way. Like, was that a leap or was it just a natural progression?
It was a leap in the sense of parts and pieces, right? Like I'd done some civil work in conjunction with the buildings that we did in the federal institutions. I already had an estimating background, a little bit from some projects that I had priced within Corcan towards the end. I was always strong with numbers. What we do is a lot of numbers between job costing and of course application on the site with elevations and things like that. So there was definitely a learning curve, but it was mostly parts and pieces and implementation of those. Yeah.
I can imagine today it would be different. You'd go on YouTube and how do I operate a massive digger thingamajiggy? Yeah. And you'd get a tutorial, but this was pre-YouTube days. But I imagine you learned a lot as you went, and it sounded like your first big client, Kingma, had faith in you and just really helped you guys grow.
Absolutely.
And so right off the bat, I've just pulled this up because I think it's useful to talk about what it is that Universal does today. And this is a site, I believe that's on Promontory, right?
East Promontory, yeah, Rexford Drive. Yeah.
And so bits and pieces of that are the road work, the grading.
Yeah.
Can you describe what we're seeing here?
Yeah. So upper left, that's basically developed road, asphalt, curb and gutter. We subcontract out those entities. So paving contractor, concrete contractor will prep for all those. Bottom left is lock block wall. So that's one type of retaining wall that we do a lot of that. We do a lot of hillside construction. It's one of our expertises. And we've built on all the major mountains around here, several subdivisions, especially Promontory. The middle picture, that was actually a storm outfall with fused pipe that we put down that same development. And I think, Josh, you were on that one. Him and I are also paid on call firefighters.
Okay.
So we're certified rope rescue technicians. So in an instance like that, it came in really handy for our skill set, because typically we would have to hire a company like Dynamic Rope Rescue to work off of ropes on that hillside and help us set that pipe. But Josh and I did it with our rope setups and did the whole thing, which ultimately saves us a lot of money just having that skill set. So
I'm curious about things like the retaining wall. Like there's obviously a lot of liability in that what the work that you're doing has to support. Who is taking the responsibility? Is it your firm, or is it engineering, or how does that all play out?
Ultimately, it's the geotechnical engineer that designs it. So he'll design it, we'll implement it, he'll inspect it as the implementation's taking place. And as long as it's been, it's never going to be signed off or approved unless he's happy. So or he or she. So at the end of the day, the geotechs taking the biggest brunt of it. But if something was to fail, everybody gets pulled into it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Has anything ever failed in the history of Universal?
Knock on wood. No.
That's good.
No.
Well, excellent. So that gives at least some backdrop for all of us, the laymen in the audience, to understand what it is that you do. And but what's interesting is it went from you and Dwayne, and just in a matter of 8 years, you went from 2 of you to 75, 80 of you.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the just scaling a business at that rate with. You mentioned one machine is $200,000. Like there's obviously financing and capital involved, managing contracts, HR, marketing, sales. Just walk us through those 8 years of just what sounds like real fast scaling for a construction company.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the beginning, like you said, it was Dwayne and I, and Dwayne, he's the operator expert. I don't run machines. I ran a Bobcat, but that's the only machine I've ever ran. I was on the ground doing the implementation down there. So he was doing all the digging and I was doing all the pipe laying. And we had the concrete prep contingent, which I had hired a guy and trained him to take over. And he actually was one of my Corcan employees that was one of my best workers there. So I hired him, trained him. He took that over as an employee. And then me and Dwayne started to develop the servicing end. We started out with some small developments. I remember our first one was a 20-lot subdivision on Monte Vista near Keith Wilson that we did. And we bought a couple of machines at that point. And once we did the rental purchase for 1 year on the Caterpillar that we bought, it was pretty easy to get more stuff after that. Once we proved we could make those payments at that price, it worked out pretty well. So we built smart. We didn't, we built as it made sense to build. But I think at some point it took off, quite fast. There was more work coming. Obviously, ambition gets into play. We want to get bigger. We want to do bigger projects. So it just all, you're trying to hire guys to man that, manifestation that you want to achieve. So.
Mm-hmm. And if we think back collectively to 2008, which was a global economic cratering, and you were impacted by that, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody was. We basically were going full blazing till that happened, and obviously it built up to 72 guys. And the difference at that point is you build a company's reputation based on what you can do, and then success is achieved from that. But once you get that big, it's not about you anymore. It's about the reputation of your guys and what your supervisors and what they're achieving. And it's a lot harder to control, we found out at that point, because, our success was always being close to the projects and very hands-on. And when you have 72 guys and you have that many projects going on, you're no longer hands-on. Dwayne can't get to all the sites and watch everything. I can't get to all the sites and watch everything. We're in meetings. You're too far away from it. So 2008 was a big eye opener for us.
Along that journey, was there a size that really appealed to you? Did you get beyond the size that was, I'm having fun, I enjoy this, like we're doing well? I don't think there was a size. I think you just wanted to keep going till it made sense not to anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think even at 72 guys, I mean, you've got so much going on and you've got so much money coming in, but you maybe don't know to the T how much is going out, right? And mistakes are happening, and mistakes in our industry are not cheap. You put something in the ground and you go and dig it back up. It's expensive, right? So like I said, you're relying on your guys to achieve quality, and you're not always necessarily getting that, and you're not there to watch everything. So. And what was the mix of projects? Was it like, who were your clients? Was it municipalities? Was it private companies? Was it developers and small and big?
Yeah, it was a mixture. I think at that point we were starting to get away from private jobs and trying to do a lot more public municipal infrastructure and things like that. We weren't doing a lot of projects at the time for the people that we'd built our success on throughout the years, and that ended up being a bit of a mistake. So.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine with public works, it's RFPs and bidding, and was that new to you as you went, or how did you navigate that?
It wasn't new because I'd done smaller projects, started out with smaller municipal projects and things like that. So, and there's not a huge difference between public sector and private sector proposals. Public sector tends to be more unit rate contracts, where private tends to be more lump sum. But beyond that, there's not too much difference. It's just typically the scale of the project.
And so coming out of that, I have a note that in 2011, your financial institution, HSBC, said, so boys, we need to scale back your line of credit.
Yeah.
Like what? Walk me through that.
So that was an integral period for us, because at the time we had a few companies that we'd been doing work for that ended up going bankrupt and took a lot of money out of our cash flow. And then, at that time, HSBC was, not too thrilled with being involved with small business banking. So they ended up pulling our line of credit. We also had a mortgage with them on an investment property that we also had to pay out. And so we had a whole big removal from our cash flow at that point in time that put us in a pretty serious situation. And with the help of, with some individuals, we were in a bit of determination. We were lucky to keep that together and survive. But it's probably one of the worst things that's ever happened to us. But probably at the same time, it was the best thing that ever happened to us, because it gave us a big picture of the type of people we wanted to work for, the type of company that we should be running, how big it should be, just learning from your mistakes and trying to prevent that from the future.
How difficult was it dealing with, I imagine you had to do layoffs?
Yeah, we had to do layoffs. We had to sell equipment. It's hard to see what you built recede, and that you never want to go backwards. You're thinking at the time that backwards isn't the better way to go, but ultimately it is. The one thing we learned, the biggest thing we learned, is bigger is not better. Right? You build a company, and the success of that company based on your capabilities and your strengths. And when you get away from implementing those strengths, that's never going to work out good unless you have guys that can achieve those same things that you previously did. And that's, especially in our industry, and I imagine in many industries, it's very hard to find.
We didn't talk about it, but what is the footprint of your area that you work in? Is it primarily Chilliwack? Is it Hope to Vancouver?
Yeah. So at that time, at our biggest point, we were all over. We were basically from Hope to Vancouver. So much bigger spectrum. Now we are basically from Hope to Abbotsford, primarily in Chilliwack. Yeah.
And today, so let's talk about today. You've got 35-ish people.
Yeah.
You've got 8 dump trucks, 15 excavators, low bed trailers, all of this equipment. And when I was talking to you previously, I said, where do you keep all of this stuff? Do you have a big property? And he said, well, if we need a big property, we're not doing something right. These need to be on job sites.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But how do you keep track of it? I imagine there's a lot of maintenance and just how often does something like this machine need to be replaced, for example?
It really depends, and we try to get the longest longevity out of a piece of equipment, obviously as much as possible. That's really my business partner's forte. He's the machine guy. He's logistics. That's his expertise. So he's got a big job in making sure all this equipment is running. Staying on top of the maintenance, getting it to the sites. Dealing with the guys that are operating that equipment, all the dump truck logistics. Just what he does is a huge component of what is entailed in this company. So, yeah, it's very strategic with equipment, because you've got to make sure that it's well maintained. And we used to think that new was the way to go, because of course, warranty and shouldn't break down. And then we got into, for a long time, just buying used equipment. And then that way we could pay for it, we could own it right away. That was great until the market got so big that you couldn't find the used equipment before, or you couldn't find the used equipment, or it was way more expensive than it was before. And it was almost better to buy new. There wasn't much of a price gap between the two. So, but then you buy new equipment, and there's not necessarily reliability on buying new either. Like, we've had things that we've owned for a few days, brand new, never been driven, and they break down. So it can be frustrating at times.
You said at age 2, you and Dwayne knew you would be in a partnership. So I imagine you never thought about going it alone. And it sounds like a partnership in your scenario has been really fruitful. You talk a lot about what Dwayne does day to day. How do you divvy it up, and what role do you play in the company these days?
So yeah, we knew in our late 20s that probably in our mid 20s that we wanted to be in a business together someday. A huge part of the success of our business is that we do two completely different things, and they really don't overlap. Like Dwayne has his expertises, which are not mine, and I have mine that are not his. And I think that's just what every partnership needs to survive, because if you do the same thing, there's always going to be competition and disagreements. And him and I have worked really, really well together for the 24 years we've been in business. Like anything, there's a few disagreements every now and then, but him and I have a really good ability to talk things out, respect each other's opinions. So it's big jobs on both fronts, and like I'd mentioned, what he does, and I look after more. I do all the project bidding, deal with a lot of the construction management. He does as well too. I deal with the engineers and clients. A lot of that is what I do. And then of course I come from the site, so I do a lot of problem solving, and as well as he does too. So it's a big task.
So you have an office here at Cowork Chilliwack.
Yes.
And right from the get-go, I saw you loading in these big monitors, and you can kind of see Jeff through the window behind them, and then I will occasionally see spreadsheets and lots of detail. So it sounds like from a technical expertise and the numbers and bidding, and that's really where you spend a lot of your time and tracking and so forth. Where did you learn those skills?
I learned a lot of that from my father and my ex-father-in-law, actually, and watching him construct spreadsheets in Excel and things like that. And I tried in the beginning to run conventional software, and I just found it didn't relate to the sites very well. Like there's a lot of building construction, you can use conventional construction software because the parts and pieces are the same and they don't vary. But in what we do, there's so much uniqueness to each project, and they differ quite greatly. So to run, strategies straight across the board for every project, it doesn't work. So I ended up developing a lot of Excel spreadsheets to form my construction software in and amongst area takeoff software and site modeling software.
We've talked a little bit about financing and money and so forth, but is there certain things that you do? Is money up front, a portion of it, paid on certain phases completed? How do you keep, because you're talking about a lot of money flowing through and a lot of capital.
Yeah.
Like, how do you keep on top of that? And has that ever been, well, obviously there's a problem around 2008, but how do you wrestle with that?
The thing is, in restructuring after 2011, we set things up the right way. And of course, after having that happen to us, we were, you run scared, right? And you have you sort of have yourself in a guard all the time. And it doesn't matter whether things are going good. You run your company like it can all end tomorrow. So we built it, restructured it, like, just so that, if we had to weather another storm, we were going to have no problems doing that. So we reduced our manpower to a tolerable size. Me and Dwayne were very hands-on, very involved, as we still are today. And, we've built a really good company with a really good group of guys that we're very fortunate to have, and have a really good company dynamic. So we have a great office staff that keeps us on our toes, keeps me and Dwayne accountable all the time. His wife, Marnie, has been our bookkeeper from the beginning. And honestly, we owe her a ton of credit, because if it wasn't for her being on me and Dwayne all the time, things probably wouldn't have gone quite as well as they did. So,
So you're all on multiple job sites. You're working out of a co-work space. Others are working home. How do you build company culture? Are there certain times a year where you all get together and celebrate or strategize?
I think we always do our company Christmas party every year. we probably should do more things, but time doesn't always permit. But what we found is much more so than a decade ago. You have to deal with employees a lot differently now, and there used to be a cookie cutter way to deal with everybody, and that no longer exists. Everybody's got a different personality. Everybody's got a different way they learn. Everybody has a different way that you have to deal with them to be effective and get the most out of them. And we've really learned that over the years. And it's just respecting the guys that work for you, because you couldn't do it without them. And the company dynamic, you have to hire so that guys are going to fit with each other, and they don't have to be best friends, but they have to work with each other for 8 hours a day and try to get the best teamwork possible. And we've really strived to do that in the last years, and we've got a great crew, a couple crews now, so it's good.
Have you ever had a office or a building that you worked out of, or has it always been somewhat remote?
We owned a property on Keith Wilson Road that had a shop. And so we used that shop for maintenance for our equipment. And in that, we had done an office off to the side. In our growing to 72 employees, we thought we had to have a big fancy office. So we bought a nice space, or leased a nice space in Legacy Pacific. Put a fair amount of money into building administrative area, boardroom, few offices. Looking back, not sure why we did that. Like nobody comes to see us, right? We typically go to see them. If I have to deal with a consultant, we go to the consultant's office. If I have to deal with a client, they have boardrooms. So it was just one of those things that you learn you don't need to spend money on. And so we basically, after the whole 2011, we downsized. We worked out of home offices, and it went to that. So.
We've talked about equipment, and you mentioned auctions, buying used and so forth, and that pendulum swinging back and forth a little bit. Where are you now with that? Are you having to do a lot of equipment acquisition, or are you good with the stuff you've got?
We bought a few large excavators, actually a couple this year, and or one last year, one early this year. And we bought them because we needed that size. We bought them new because there was no used available. And funny enough, we just bought those, and all of a sudden there's been a bit of a shift in the market where now the pipeline's done, and there's a lot of equipment becoming available, especially in Alberta. And we could have probably got those machines for half the price we paid for them, but obviously they weren't brand new, and obviously they would have had a number of hours on them, but still there would have probably been a bit of a savings there.
So do you get them on Amazon.ca, or?
I wish it was that easy. We have some different types of dealers that we deal with, but primarily we're John Deere. So we deal with the local John Deere dealer, and they've been really good to us over the years.
And they do maintenance here in Chilliwack or Abbotsford, or?
Yeah, so warranty stuff, we'll go out to Langley at their dealership in Port Kells. We have a really good subcontracted mechanic that we use, and he looks after all our stuff. So he does a really, really good job of doing that.
So over the 24 years of the company, have you noticed that technology has played a role? Obviously computers and so forth, but even on site, has technology progressed, or is it pretty much the way it was done is the way it still is done? No,
it's actually gone, quite crazy in the tech market with our industry. And originally when we first started out, I was doing construction survey and using a total station, which is a pretty standard method for surveyors. And I basically self-taught myself that. So, it was one of the things we did under our own umbrella. And then probably, I think, near 2010, GPS started to become relevant in our area of construction. So we got our first GPS system, rover system, and started doing our own layout that way. And of course, we could it wasn't as accurate as it is today. So, you could do things like earth moving and road grading and put your pipes, lay out for your pipes and stuff. It's come leaps and bounds today where the accuracy is within millimeters. So every one of our construction foremen have their own GPS rover system. They do all their own layout. We have robotic total stations. It used to be 2-man. I would stand behind the total station and, I'd have the guy on the pole, and it's like, keep it straight, level it up, right? Like it would get frustrating at times. Now, robotic total station, you hold the pole yourself, it follows you, right? And you just move to the coordinates. So probably the biggest jump is machine control. So we have survey systems built right into the machine. I'll basically download a survey file into the machine. The operator can see on a 10-inch tablet that sits right beside him. It'll show him basically 3 different views. It'll show them the plan view, which is great because for many years, operators weren't in the know of really what things look like. So now they can see where all the pipes are in the ground. They have cross-section screens where they just have to pull a line. Like they literally don't even have to look out of the machine. And the way the machine's calibrated, it doesn't matter how it's sitting. If they pull this line, it will shape the site on however it's been designed. So, and then they can see the 3D model. It's way more advanced. And we were one of the first companies around here to actually adopt that in our machines. And a lot of guys have followed suit since.
And do you have inventory of your equipment? Could you see one of your diggers slowly going down Keith Wilson Road or something and realize that it should be on the site? Or?
No, we don't. We haven't gone that far because that would mean somebody would literally have to load it up and take
Fair
it.
enough.
But yeah, I mean, you never know. The way things are going, that might be something that has to be done in the future.
As you were talking about a lot of the tech built into the machines, I know in agriculture there's been a lot of controversy around how locked down, say, John Deere harvester is. And people are requesting right to, load their own software or have that. And I would imagine, like, how does that work? Are you locked in for software contracts as well to run the machinery, or is it all with it?
No, I mean, like say John Deere, for instance, they kind of have a partnership with TopCon. And they obviously would like to see TopCon machine control and survey systems associated with their equipment, but by no means can they implement that. So when I looked at, I've always been big into tech, and anything that could be implemented that could make us more productive, I've been for. And basically I researched all the systems, looked at what was going to integrate well with the current survey systems that we had, and pass around the information, between all entities the easiest. And we ended up going with Leica products, and we've been using them for over 10 years now, and they're in a lot of our equipment. So.
So you mentioned you're 52.
Yep.
You must be thinking about succession or so forth, maybe 10 years down the line. Have you given serious consideration to what the future of Universal looks like?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, me and my business partner, this is our baby, super important to us. And, in saying that, both our sons, my oldest son, Josh, and his youngest son, Colton, they both work for the company. And they both got a little bit of ownership. And, but yeah, we want to, this is for them. We're doing this for them one day. And, we love doing it. Like it's a hobby to us. It's not even like work. Like I never wake up in the morning and, obviously I can't speak for Dwayne, but I'm pretty sure I can. We can't see us doing anything else, full time, right? Like there's no other hobby that, we could do golf or fishing or anything like that would sustain us into a retirement. And, I honestly don't ever see myself fully retiring. Love what I do too much. I think I believe if you slow down, you go down. And I've seen that happen to many guys that have retired. So I don't want that to be me. And so I think I'll always have a foot in the door, but we've got some other endeavors that we want to do. But ultimately, we want to hand it off to the boys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, Josh? Your dad said he's not going to ever exit. No comment.
It's nice having something to always be lifelong. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we want to, me and Dwight both want to travel. And I mean, I think my perfect life would be working 6 months of the year and traveling 6 months of the year, not necessarily back to back intermixed, right? Like that would be great. So,
And I imagine now with a team of 35 that there is some redundancy, that you're not, I imagine you're still extremely involved, but there must be layers that you've delegated and have some freedom, or does it feel like you're 24/7 still?
we're not 24/7 because of guys on the sites. We've got a lot of faith in our guys, and they're all developing, Josh included, and our other foremen, and they've got good guys underneath them, pipe layers, operators. Like we've probably never been more comfortable with the manpower we have as we are right now. But there's just so many moving pieces to what we do, and also with the economy, what's going on and the interest rates going up, and there's always some hesitancy from the developers. Should we do this? Should we do that? The one thing that we're finding right now that is the biggest challenge is just getting things to happen when they're supposed to happen. Like we had a job that we were supposed to start last year, and it didn't start till it's not going to start till like now, and then we got another job in replacement of that job, so that we could fill that gap, and then all of a sudden there was a reason that job couldn't start. So there's always it's so strategic, and you can't control everything, but it's just like you just know at the end of the day, guys have mortgages to pay, they have bills to pay. It's super important for us that our guys are always busy. Right. So we're passionate about that, and we're fortunate, knock on wood, to always been busy. So
From a sales and marketing standpoint, you've got a really nice website. Where does the work come from? Is it pretty much referral and repeat customers, or is new stuff coming through a web search, for example?
yeah, we're at a good point in our careers where our company's become a household name, and we used to be in awe of companies when we were back 10, 15 years ago, and these companies were like, man, they get the work really easy, right? So we've got some clients that really like to work with us. We give them a lot of value in what we do. Me and Dwayne are both very hands-on with them, do a lot of upfront work for them, problem solving, things like that, just essentially make their lives easier, and then in turn they like to work with you. A lot of our work too is all bid. So we get invited to a lot of different project opportunities to bid them against other companies. Also, there's bid procurement sites, Bid Central, BC Bid, where a lot of projects come through. So I'm always scanning those. I get emails every day that are kind of in line with my search engine of the type of jobs that I want to do.
Right.
So it's a real combination of things. Yeah.
Well, wow, it's great learning about your story. Let's hear it for Jeff. I can only ask so many questions. I'm sure there are better questions from our audience. Right over there, we've got a mic. Now, we can certainly hear you, but it's nice to get them on the mic so they're recorded as well. So, Colin's always good for the first question.
Thanks, Jeff, for being here. Great to just learn so much from you tonight. And on the lows as well as the highs, thanks so much for your transparency to just encourage those who have yet to face those trials in the future. Yeah. What I'd like to know is there's a lot of huge progression in AI today and automation. You've touched on some of that, of course, in your interview here. What I always find amusing is that in the generative AI space, we have the people who thought their jobs were the safest actually being challenged the most right now. And the kinds of jobs that we thought would be easy to automate seem to be tougher. So I can see how that would be impacting you guys, where you've got the hands and the feet on the ground, despite all of the equipment, is still such a vital part of it.
Yeah.
Do you see, as we see the new crop of robotics coming to market in the near future, do you see, thinking about Boston Robotics and others like that, do you see them having any foothold in the next 10 years, 5 years? What do you think the trajectory is of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't see it happening within the next 10 years. I think there's some things where automation has already come into play, like in the mines and with the trucking aspect of it. There's a lot of self automated robotic mining trucks, because you can put GPS coordinates in them and they just A to B, dump, load, dump, load. With what we do, I don't know if I can. It'll never happen in my lifetime, I don't think. Could you automate an excavator, pre-program it with a model and a strategy? Yeah, it could be done, but there's a lot of thought and strategy and reactions to different unknowns underground that have to be dealt with that I don't think you could do with AI or robotics. I'm sure somebody will prove us wrong one day, but I think it'd be pretty tough.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Daniel?
So thanks so much for doing this. You mentioned about the 1 to 7 years scaling like absolutely crazy. What was that like? And if you were to chart it on a graph, is it linear? Is it quite parabolic? Does it kind of just start off really, really slow and all of a sudden, boom, you're to 75? Like how was that progression?
It was, it was over... it was over 7-8 years, but it was actually pretty linear. Probably the biggest spike would have been, in year 7-8. That's where it really came on. But we didn't feel it coming on too quick where we couldn't control it. It was all decision made, but at the same time, each one of those decisions, each piece of growth pulls you further and further away from what it is that you're doing. And if I could turn back time, and I'm not a reverse thinker, but I would have just stayed at the size we were now, because we're way more profitable now at 35 than we ever were at 72. So, and it's much easier to manage. So, if I had something to say for anybody who wanted to start their own business or is currently running their own business, it's, your success is typically made on you. And, I think sometimes just staying small and capitalizing profit on that is a good thing.
Thank you.
Any other takers? Gabe, we've got a question here.
Thank you. So every industry that I hear of these days, including my own, is just starving for people. How has this affected you? And if it hasn't affected you, for employers out there, what's your secret?
Oh no, it's affected our industry straight across the board. I'm finding, especially in our industry, that a lot less people want to do it. And the thing I can find as a common denominator in our industry and straight across everybody else's is everybody wants big money with a small amount of experience. And it's hard to find guys that want to start at the bottom, because that's where you really, I come from the bottom. I started as a laborer, worked my way up. I absorbed, I was a sponge, and I wanted to make my way to the top. And you don't see a lot of that anymore, way less of it. And at the same time too, when I worked for other guys' companies, I ran those companies like they were my own. And people, have said to me a lot of times, well, it's because, you were going to run your own company someday. And I just said, no, it doesn't matter. Like, I could run Universal or I could work for Tim, right? And I would have the same mandate regardless of whether it was my own company or not. So it's hard to find that. And it's tough finding guys in our industry. Especially in the last couple of years when the pipeline came through, it just gobbled everybody up because you can make big money with little experience. And now, obviously, the pipeline's teetering down, and you're finding more of these guys. But
yeah, it definitely goes in waves. But that's one of the things with staying small smaller is that, you know, you can be selective, you can find the right pieces to the puzzle. There's going to be some turnover in trying to get that perfect fit. But, you know, once you get it, you just treat those guys good and hang on to them. Yeah.
This is not a question. It was an anecdote. It made me think. I ran a manufacturing company in Alberta in the 80s. And so at one point we could not find welders. And it was metal fabrication. So we were apprenticing area farmers just to you know, get the labor. Then when the oil industry collapsed in 1986, they were literally lined up at the door, journeyman welders. We could have any number, which was good because we were expanding at the time. But you're in the dry period like we felt in 1983, 84, and 85.
Yeah, no, it's that seems to be the way it goes. It's, you know, you get, like I said, with the pipeline or some other thing that comes through, and the guys disperse. A lot of guys, you know, even when we were building up to our bigger tally, the oil rigs were the big thing at that time. So guys were going there and making crazy money. So we did find it hard to find guys, and I think at the time too, and one of our mistakes was we were filling positions with bodies. Right, and that was a big mistake. And now for us it's quality over quantity, and I think that's a really good place to be.
I think that's it. Let's hear it for Jeff.
Thank you.